Sarah Mitchell had always been different from other kids at Lincoln Middle School. Born with cerebral palsy, she walked with a special stick that helped her balance. The silver walking stick had been her companion for 3 years now, and she had grown quite attached to it. Her parents had it specially made with a comfortable grip and even added small stickers of her favorite cartoon characters. Every morning, Sarah would wake up excited about going to school. She loved learning, especially math and science. Her teachers often praised her for being one of the brightest students in 7th grade. Despite her physical challenges, Sarah had a brilliant mind and a heart full of dreams. She wanted to become a scientist one day and maybe even work for NASA. The hallways of Lincoln Middle School were always crowded between classes. Students rushed from room to room, carrying heavy backpacks and chatting loudly with friends. Sarah had learned to navigate these busy corridors carefully, always staying close to the wall where it was safer. Her walking stick clicked softly against the polished floor as she made her way to her next class. Most students at school were kind to Sarah. They would smile at her in the hallways, and some even helped her carry her books when her arms got tired. Her best friend Emma always saved her a seat at lunch and made sure she felt included in group activities. Sarah felt grateful for these friendships, even though she sometimes noticed other students staring at her walking stick. However, not everyone at Lincoln Middle School was understanding. There was a group of 3 boys who seemed to find entertainment in making others feel small. Jake Morrison was their leader, a tall boy with messy brown hair who thought he was funnier than he actually was. His 2 followers, Marcus and Tyler, would laugh at everything Jake said, even when his jokes were mean and hurtful. These 3 boys had a reputation for picking on students they considered different or weaker. They would make fun of kids who wore glasses, students who struggled with reading, or anyone who didn't fit into their narrow idea of what was normal. Teachers had spoken to them several times about their behavior, but they were clever about bullying when adults weren't watching. Sarah had been lucky so far. The bullies had mostly ignored her, perhaps because she kept to herself and didn't draw attention. She would quietly go about her day, focusing on her studies and spending time with her few close friends. Her parents had taught her to be proud of who she was and not to let anyone make her feel ashamed of her disability. But on this particular Tuesday afternoon, Sarah's luck was about to change. The autumn sun was shining through the school windows as students prepared for the final class of the day. Sarah was walking toward her locker, thinking about the science project she needed to finish at home. Her walking stick tapped rhythmically against the floor, and she hummed quietly to herself. She didn't notice Jake Morrison and his friends watching her from across the hallway. They had been looking for someone to bother, and Sarah, walking alone with her distinctive silver stick, caught their attention. Jake whispered something to Marcus and Tyler, and all 3 began to smirk. They started walking in Sarah's direction, their footsteps quick and purposeful. Sarah was focused on remembering her locker combination when she heard footsteps approaching behind her. She didn't think much of it at first, since the hallways were always busy, but something about the way these footsteps sounded made her feel uneasy. She could hear muffled laughter and whispered words that she couldn't quite make out. As she reached her locker and began turning the combination dial, Sarah felt a presence behind her. The laughter was getting louder now, and she could sense that whoever was there was paying attention to her specifically. Her heart began to beat a little faster, and she tried to open her locker as quickly as possible. Just as Sarah managed to open her locker, she felt a sudden jolt. Someone had bumped into her from behind, causing her to stumble forward slightly. Her walking stick, which had been leaning against her leg, clattered to the floor. The sound echoed through the hallway, drawing the attention of several nearby students. "Oops, sorry about that," Jake Morrison said in a voice that didn't sound sorry at all. His tone was mocking, and there was a cruel smile on his face. Marcus and Tyler stood beside him, trying to contain their laughter. Sarah bent down to retrieve her walking stick, but Jake was quicker. "Let me get that for you," Jake said, snatching the silver stick before Sarah could reach it. He held it up high, examining it like it was some kind of strange object he had never seen before. "Wow, this is pretty fancy. Must have cost your parents a fortune." Sarah's cheeks burned with embarrassment and anger. She reached out her hand toward Jake, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke. "Please give it back. I need that to walk properly." Other students in the hallway had begun to notice the commotion. Some stopped to watch while others pretended not to see what was happening. "Oh, you need this?" Jake said. waving the walking stick in the air like a magic wand. "I don't know, it looks like a pretty cool toy. Maybe I should keep it for a while." Marcus and Tyler burst into laughter, clearly enjoying their friend's performance. The sound of their laughter felt like knives in Sarah's chest. Sarah tried to remain calm, but her hands were shaking now. Without her walking stick, she felt vulnerable and unsteady. She had to lean against her locker to maintain her balance. "It's not a toy," she said, her voice getting stronger despite her fear. "It's medical equipment, and I really need it back." "Medical equipment?" Jake repeated, making his voice sound overly dramatic. "It just looks like a fancy stick to me." He began walking backward down the hallway, holding Sarah's walking stick like a trophy. Marcus and Tyler followed him, continuing to laugh and make jokes about the situation. Sarah felt tears beginning to form in her eyes, but she was determined not to cry in front of these bullies. She tried to follow them, but without her walking stick, moving quickly was difficult and dangerous. She had to take small, careful steps, using the wall for support. The hallway felt longer than it had ever felt before. Several students watched the scene unfold, but none of them stepped in to help. Some looked uncomfortable and turned away, while others seemed curious about what would happen next. Sarah felt completely alone, even though she was surrounded by her classmates. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. "Come on, guys, give her the stick back," called out a voice from somewhere in the crowd. Sarah looked around hopefully, but she couldn't see who had spoken. Jake ignored the comment completely and continued his backward walk down the hallway, swinging the walking stick like he was conducting an orchestra. "I think I'll hold on to this for a while," Jake announced loudly, making sure everyone could hear him. "Maybe Sarah can learn to walk without it. Isn't that what physical therapy is for?" His comment drew uncomfortable laughter from a few students, while others shifted nervously. Sarah's science teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, appeared at the end of the hallway, but she was too far away to see what was happening clearly. Jake noticed the teacher's presence and quickly tossed the walking stick to Marcus, who caught it and immediately threw it to Tyler. They were playing keep-away now, treating Sarah's essential mobility aid like it was nothing more than a game. The humiliation Sarah felt was unlike anything she had ever experienced. She had always been proud of her independence and her ability to navigate the world despite her challenges. But now, standing in the hallway without her walking stick, she felt exposed and helpless. The silver stick that had given her confidence and mobility was being used to mock her. Tyler held the walking stick high above his head, grinning widely. "Maybe we should hide this somewhere safe," he suggested. "You know, for safekeeping." The three boys looked at each other with mischievous expressions, clearly planning their next move. Sarah realized that pleading with them wasn't going to work. These boys were enjoying her distress too much to simply give up their cruel game. She needed help, but looking around the hallway, she saw mostly faces that avoided her gaze. The few students who seemed sympathetic were clearly too intimidated to intervene against Jake and his friends. The situation was getting worse by the minute. Jake had taken the walking stick back from Tyler and was now pretending to limp dramatically down the hallway, mocking the way Sarah walked. His exaggerated movements were cruel and hurtful, and several students gasped at his insensitive behavior. Sarah felt her heart sink as she watched him make fun of her disability. "Look at me, I'm Sarah," Jake said in a high-pitched voice, continuing his cruel imitation. He dragged one foot behind him and leaned heavily on the walking stick, making it look like walking was impossibly difficult. Marcus and Tyler cheered him on, clapping their hands like he was putting on some kind of entertaining show. Sarah's tears were flowing freely now, despite her efforts to stay strong. The humiliation was unbearable, and she felt smaller than she had ever felt in her life. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor and never have to face her classmates again. The walking stick that had always made her feel independent and capable was being used to turn her into a joke. "Stop it," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. But Jake was too caught up in his performance to hear her, or maybe he simply didn't care. He continued his mocking display, even adding sound effects and pretending to struggle with imaginary obstacles. The few students who had been laughing at first now looked uncomfortable, but still no one stepped forward to help. Mrs. Rodriguez was walking in their direction, but she was moving slowly, stopping to talk with other teachers along the way. Sarah tried to wave at her, hoping to catch her attention, but the teacher was too far away and too distracted to notice. The hallway felt like an endless tunnel of shame and embarrassment. Just when Sarah thought the situation couldn't get any worse, Jake stopped his cruel performance and held the walking stick high above his head again. "I think it's time to put this somewhere safe," he announced with a wicked grin. He looked around the hallway, searching for the perfect hiding spot that would cause Sarah the most trouble. "How about we put it in the lost and found?" Marcus suggested. "That way Sarah can go ask the office if anyone has seen her special stick." The three boys found this idea hilarious, and their laughter echoed off the hallway walls. Sarah knew that getting to the office without her walking stick would be extremely difficult and embarrassing. "Or better yet," Tyler added, "we could put it in the gym storage room. I bet Sarah loves going to gym class." This comment was particularly cruel because Sarah had always struggled in physical education. While other students ran and played sports easily, she had to sit on the sidelines most of the time, watching others do things she could never do. Jake's eyes lit up with a new idea. "Actually, I have an even better plan," he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. He whispered something to Marcus and Tyler, and their grins grew even wider. Sarah couldn't hear what he was saying, but she could tell from their expressions that whatever they were planning was going to be terrible. The three boys began walking toward the stairwell at the end of the hallway. Jake still held Sarah's walking stick, twirling it like a baton as he walked. Sarah tried to follow them, but without her mobility aid, she could only move slowly and carefully. Each step was a struggle, and she had to stop frequently to rest against the wall. "Please don't," Sarah called out desperately. "I really need that back. I can't get around school without it." Her voice carried a note of panic now because she was beginning to understand that these boys might actually hide her walking stick somewhere she couldn't reach it. The thought of having to navigate Lincoln Middle School without her mobility aid filled her with dread. But Jake and his friends weren't listening to her pleas. They had reached the stairwell and were looking up toward the second floor. Jake was pointing at something, and all three boys were nodding in agreement. Sarah realized with horror that they were planning to take her walking stick upstairs, probably to hide it somewhere impossible to find. The second floor of Lincoln Middle School was where the 8th grade classrooms were located. Sarah, as a 7th grader, rarely had reason to go up there, and doing so without her walking stick would be incredibly challenging. The stairs were steep and had no handrails on both sides, making them difficult for her to navigate even under the best circumstances. As the boys started climbing the stairs, Sarah felt a wave of despair wash over her. She watched helplessly as her silver walking stick disappeared around the corner of the stairwell. The clicking sound it usually made against the floor was now being produced by Jake's careless handling, and each click felt like a reminder of her powerlessness in this situation. Several students had gathered to watch what was happening, but they all seemed frozen in place. Some looked genuinely concerned about Sarah's situation, but they appeared too intimidated by Jake and his friends to take action. The unspoken rule at Lincoln Middle School seemed to be that you didn't stand up to the bullies unless you wanted to become their next target. Sarah stood at the bottom of the stairwell, looking up at the steps that seemed impossibly steep without her walking stick. She could hear Jake, Marcus, and Tyler laughing somewhere on the second floor, but she couldn't see them anymore. The sound of their voices echoed down the stairwell, mixing with the clicking of her walking stick against the floor above. Taking a deep breath, Sarah decided she had to try to follow them. She couldn't just give up and let them hide her walking stick somewhere unreachable. Gripping the handrail tightly with both hands, she began the slow and difficult process of climbing the stairs. Each step required careful planning and tremendous effort. About halfway up the stairs, Sarah had to stop and rest. Her legs were shaking from the exertion, and she was breathing heavily. The physical challenge of climbing stairs without her walking stick was exhausting, but the emotional toll of the situation was even worse. She felt angry, embarrassed, and completely powerless. From her position on the stairs, Sarah could see some of the students in the hallway below watching her struggle. A few looked like they wanted to help, but they remained where they were. The unspoken fear of becoming the next target of Jake's bullying seemed to paralyze everyone around her. Finally, Sarah reached the top of the stairs. The 8th grade hallway was mostly empty, since classes had ended and most students had already left for the day. She could hear voices coming from one of the classrooms down the hall, and she realized that Jake and his friends must have gone in there to hide her walking stick. Moving slowly along the wall for support, Sarah made her way toward the sound of the voices. Her progress was painfully slow, and she had to stop every few steps to maintain her balance. The hallway seemed endless, and each classroom door she passed felt like another obstacle between her and her mobility aid. As she got closer to the voices, Sarah could hear Jake giving instructions to Marcus and Tyler. "Put it behind the teacher's desk," he was saying. "She'll never think to look there, and even if she does, she won't be able to reach it without help." The cruelty of his plan was breathtaking. He had found a hiding spot that would be not only difficult to find but also impossible for Sarah to access on her own. Sarah reached the doorway of the classroom and peered inside. She could see Jake standing near the teacher's desk while Marcus and Tyler positioned her walking stick in some hidden location behind it. The sight of her silver stick being handled so carelessly by these bullies filled her with a mixture of rage and despair. "Found what you're looking for?" Jake asked, noticing Sarah in the doorway. His voice was mocking and triumphant. He clearly felt proud of his cruel accomplishment and was enjoying Sarah's obvious distress. Marcus and Tyler turned to look at her, both wearing satisfied grins on their faces. "Please," Sarah said, her voice hoarse from crying and exhaustion. "Just give it back. I'm sorry if I did something to make you angry, but I really need my walking stick. I can't get around school without it." She was willing to apologize for anything, even though she had done nothing wrong if it would end this nightmare. "Oh, your walking stick," Jake said, pretending to be surprised. "I don't see any walking stick. Do you guys see a walking stick anywhere?" Marcus and Tyler shook their heads dramatically, playing along with Jake's cruel game. They all looked around the classroom with exaggerated confusion, as if they had no idea what Sarah was talking about. "It's behind the desk," Sarah said, pointing toward the area where she had seen them hide it. "I saw you put it there just now." But even as she spoke, she realized how helpless she was. Even if she could prove the walking stick was there, she couldn't reach it without help. And these boys certainly weren't going to help her. "I think you're confused," Jake said with fake concern in his voice. "Maybe you should go ask a teacher for help. I'm sure they'll be happy to look for your missing stick." He knew perfectly well that getting help would require Sarah to navigate back down the stairs and find a teacher, all without her mobility aid. The three boys walked past Sarah toward the classroom door, clearly pleased with themselves. As Jake passed by her, he leaned in close and whispered, "Maybe next time you'll stay out of our way." Sarah didn't understand what he meant by that, since she had never bothered them or gotten in their way, but the threat in his voice was unmistakable. Sarah watched helplessly as her tormentors left the classroom and headed back toward the stairwell. She could hear them laughing and congratulating each other on their successful prank. The sound of their voices faded as they made their way back to the first floor, leaving Sarah alone on the second floor without her walking stick. Looking around the empty classroom, Sarah tried to figure out how she could retrieve her mobility aid. The teacher's desk was large and heavy, positioned against the wall in a way that made the space behind it difficult to access. Even with her walking stick, reaching that area would have been challenging. Without it, the task seemed impossible. Sarah felt more alone and helpless than she had ever felt in her life. The school building, which had always felt like a safe and familiar place, now seemed hostile and unwelcoming. Every hallway looked impossibly long, every staircase appeared dangerously steep, and every classroom felt like a potential trap. Sarah was still trying to figure out how to reach her walking stick when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Her heart jumped with hope that maybe a teacher was coming to help, but when she looked toward the door, she saw a student she didn't recognize. It was a black girl who looked about her own age with kind eyes and a determined expression on her face. "Are you okay?" the girl asked, stepping into the classroom. She had clearly seen Sarah's distress and had come to investigate. Unlike the other students who had watched the bullying incident unfold, this girl seemed genuinely concerned and willing to get involved. Sarah wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. "Some boys took my walking stick and hid it behind that desk," she explained, pointing toward the teacher's desk. "I can't reach it by myself, and I need it to walk properly." Her voice was shaky, but she felt a small spark of hope now that someone was actually talking to her. The girl's expression darkened with anger when she heard what had happened. "Are you talking about Jake Morrison and his stupid friends?" she asked. When Sarah nodded, the girl shook her head in disgust. "Those guys are the worst. They think they're so funny, but they're just bullies who pick on people who can't fight back." "I'm Maya," the girl said, walking over to the teacher's desk. "Maya Johnson. I'm in 8th grade, but I've heard about what those jerks do to younger kids. Nobody should have to deal with that kind of treatment." She began moving chairs out of the way, clearly preparing to retrieve Sarah's walking stick. Sarah felt overwhelmed with gratitude. After 30 minutes of feeling completely alone and helpless, here was someone who not only believed her but was actually willing to help. "I'm Sarah Mitchell," she said. "Thank you so much for helping me. I was starting to think I'd be stuck here forever." Maya squeezed behind the teacher's desk, moving carefully in the tight space. "Here it is," she said, pulling out Sarah's silver walking stick. She examined it carefully, making sure it hadn't been damaged before handing it back to Sarah. Those idiots really thought this was funny, didn't they? The moment Sarah's fingers closed around her walking stick, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. The familiar weight and texture of the grip made her feel like herself again. With her mobility aid back in her possession, the classroom no longer felt like a prison, and the hallways no longer seemed impossibly difficult to navigate. "Thank you," Sarah said, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. "You have no idea how much this means to me. I was so scared they were going to leave it somewhere I could never find it." She stood up straighter now, feeling her confidence returning along with her mobility. Maya's anger hadn't subsided. "This is completely unacceptable," she said firmly. "Jake and his friends can't just go around stealing people's medical equipment and think it's some kind of joke. What they did was cruel and probably illegal." Her sense of justice was clearly offended by what she had witnessed. "I don't want to make trouble," Sarah said quietly. "I just want to go home and forget this whole thing happened." Part of her was afraid that reporting the incident might make Jake and his friends even angrier, leading to worse treatment in the future. But Maya shook her head vigorously. "No way. If we let them get away with this, they'll just do it to someone else tomorrow. Maybe next time it'll be a kid who doesn't have anyone to help them." Her moral conviction was impressive, and Sarah found herself inspired by Maya's courage and determination. "Besides," Maya continued, "what they did wasn't just mean, it was dangerous. What if you had fallen trying to get up those stairs without your walking stick? What if you had gotten hurt?" She was making valid points that Sarah hadn't fully considered in her emotional state. Maya helped Sarah navigate back toward the stairwell, staying close in case she needed support. As they walked, Maya shared her own experiences with Jake's bullying. "He made fun of my hair last month," she said. "Called it nappy and ugly. But I didn't let him get away with it. I reported him to the principal, and he had to apologize in front of the whole class." "Weren't you afraid he'd try to get revenge?" Sarah asked, impressed by Maya's bravery but concerned about the potential consequences of standing up to bullies. "Of course I was scared," Maya admitted, "but I realized that bullies only have power if we let them have it. When we stand up to them, they usually back down pretty quickly. They're looking for easy targets, not real fights." Her wisdom seemed beyond her years. As they reached the top of the stairwell, Maya positioned herself on Sarah's weaker side, ready to provide support if needed. "Take your time," she said gently. "We're not in any hurry." Her patience and kindness were a sharp contrast to the cruelty Sarah had experienced earlier. Going down the stairs with her walking stick was much easier than going up without it had been. Sarah felt stable and confident again, and Maya's presence beside her made the journey feel safe and comfortable. For the first time in over 30 minutes, Sarah felt like she could breathe normally again. When they reached the first floor, Maya turned to Sarah with a determined expression. "Now we're going to the principal's office," she said firmly. "Mr. Thompson needs to know what happened here today. Jake and his friends can't be allowed to think this kind of behavior is acceptable." Sarah hesitated for a moment, still worried about potential retaliation, but Maya's confidence was contagious. Together they walked toward the main office, Sarah's walking stick clicking reassuringly against the floor with each step. Maya walked beside her, matching her pace and continuing to offer encouragement and support. When they entered the principal's office, Mrs. Henderson, the secretary, looked up with concern. She had known Sarah since she started at Lincoln Middle School and could tell immediately that something was wrong. "What can we help you girls with today?" she asked kindly. "We need to speak with Mr. Thompson about a serious bullying incident," Maya said with remarkable composure for a 13-year-old. 3 students stole Sarah's walking stick and hid it where she couldn't reach it. "This is medical equipment, and what they did was dangerous and cruel." Mrs. Henderson's expression grew serious as she heard the details. She immediately called Mr. Thompson on the intercom, and within minutes, the principal emerged from his office. Mr. Thompson was a tall, gentle man who had always made Sarah feel welcome at the school, and seeing his concerned face made her feel safer. "Tell me what happened," Mr. Thompson said, leading both girls into his office and closing the door behind them. Sarah found herself able to speak more clearly now, with Maya's support and the principal's obvious concern giving her courage. She recounted the entire incident, from Jake's initial accident to finding her walking stick hidden behind the teacher's desk. Maya filled in additional details, explaining how she had found Sarah stranded on the second floor and describing the cruel way Jake had mocked Sarah's disability. Mr. Thompson listened intently, taking notes and asking clarifying questions. His expression grew increasingly serious as he heard the full story. "This is absolutely unacceptable," Mr. Thompson said firmly when the girls finished their account. "Taking someone's mobility aid is not just bullying. It's potentially a crime. Sarah, I want you to know that we take this very seriously, and there will be immediate consequences for the students involved." The principal called Jake Morrison, Marcus Chen, and Tyler Brooks to his office immediately. When the three boys arrived, looking confused and slightly worried, Mr. Thompson confronted them with the accusations. At first, they tried to deny everything, claiming it had all been a harmless joke and that Sarah was overreacting. But Maya spoke up with quiet authority. "I saw Sarah stranded on the second floor without her walking stick," she said. "I found her mobility aid hidden exactly where she said you put it. This wasn't a joke, it was cruel and dangerous." Her testimony, combined with Sarah's detailed account, made their denials impossible to maintain. Faced with the evidence and the seriousness of Mr. Thompson's tone, Jake finally admitted what they had done. However, he continued to minimize the situation, claiming they hadn't meant to hurt anyone and were just having fun. His lack of genuine remorse was obvious to everyone in the room. Mr. Thompson imposed immediate consequences. All three boys were suspended for 3 days and were required to write formal apologies to Sarah. Additionally, they would have to complete 20 hours of community service working with disabled individuals to help them understand the impact of their actions. Jake's parents were called immediately, and a meeting was scheduled to discuss his behavior. "Furthermore," Mr. Thompson continued, "if any of you ever bother Sarah again, or if I hear about you bullying any other student, you will face much more serious consequences, including possible expulsion." His tone left no doubt that he meant every word. After the bullies were dismissed and sent home with their suspension notices, Mr. Thompson turned his attention back to Sarah and Maya. "Sarah, I want to apologize that this happened to you in our school," he said sincerely. "You should never have to worry about your safety or your ability to move around our building." He then looked at Maya with obvious admiration. "Maya, what you did today took real courage. You saw someone who needed help, and you didn't hesitate to get involved. That's exactly the kind of character we hope to see in our students." Maya smiled modestly. "I just did what anyone should do," she said. "Nobody deserves to be treated the way those guys treated Sarah." But Sarah knew that Maya had done something special. She had stood up when others had remained silent. As the girls left the principal's office, Sarah felt a mix of emotions. She was relieved that justice had been served and grateful that Maya had helped her. But more than that, she felt inspired by Maya's courage and kindness. Maya had shown her that not everyone would stand by and watch when others were being mistreated. Over the following weeks, Sarah and Maya became close friends. Maya introduced Sarah to her group of friends, who welcomed her warmly and made sure she felt included in their activities. The incident with Jake and his friends became a turning point for Sarah, not just because the bullying stopped, but because it led to a friendship that enriched her life immeasurably. Jake, Marcus, and Tyler returned to school after their suspension with a noticeably different attitude. Their community service experience had given them a new perspective on disability, and they never bothered Sarah again. Occasionally, Jake would even nod politely when he passed Sarah in the hallway, a small but significant change from his previous behavior. Sarah learned that sometimes the worst experiences can lead to the most meaningful connections. Maya's act of courage had not only rescued her from a terrible situation, but had also shown her the power of standing up for others. From that day forward, Sarah made a promise to herself to be the kind of person who would step in when others needed help, just as Maya had done for her. The silver walking stick continued to be Sarah's faithful companion, but now it reminded her not just of her own strength and independence, but also of the day when a brave girl named Maya had shown her what true friendship looked like. It was a lesson that would stay with her for the rest of her life.